Our writers, especially our imaginative writers, continue to reconstruct, reimagine our history, especially the gruesome, gloomy parts, the deliberately hidden parts of our history. And this process, no doubt, is exacting great stress and untold strain on the writers. For this, we are indebted to them. This is another adventure in Guyanese literature. This is another episode in oral tradition. Fred, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Patamba. It's good to join you. Good to be here.
Fred, you have an extensive or expansive body of writing covering a wide range of issues, including enslavement, slavery, Black Lives Matter, human rights, trauma, recovery, redemption, racism, history, childhood memory, memory as invention. And some of your books are set in Guyana, the UK, and North America. Now, against this backdrop of about some 20 publications, is it still a challenge to write each new book?
Yes, thank you for asking about that, Patamba. Books are hard, as people know. You have to live with it for a long time. It's like a marriage and a partnership until the book is finished and it all mash up and you go your separate ways. But during that process of being together and cohabiting, you have to get along. You sometimes don't, and you have to return to the same site over and over again
Yeah.
for some kind of return.
Yeah. I like this quotation at the beginning of your book, your recent book, Year of Plagues, which is a memoir of 2020. And it goes like this, I quote, "Beware of the terror of not producing. Beware of the urge to justify your decision." Comment?
Yes, well, not producing is a kind of silence that you don't want. It's like oblivion. And then once you begin with utterance, how dare you? Well, once you enter that arena, you're in trouble as well. It's a little bit of a catch-22 situation, but you prefer utterance to the null and void. And so writing is, writing yourself into being, into life, as it were.
This is not a trick question. The Year of Plagues is, I quote, a meandering narrative, and therefore it was easy to write. Comment?
Well, if you begin by saying this is not a trick question, I immediately think in a Anancy style, here comes the trick, I get go, but thank you for saying that. I mean, yes, it's a multiple approach to storytelling. Um, Meandering might be a charge. It might seem like it's a problem, but it actually isn't. If you approach something indirectly, it allows you to have several approaches to a problem because there are several possible solutions to it, and those different points of view show a kind of flexibility in your outlook. So I see that multiple approach as necessary for problem solving, especially if you think someone is trying to come at you with one story, one big view, and you're thinking, I see it differently. And as you know, if you if something happens, like an accident, and there are 10 witnesses, each person located will tell you a slightly different story about it, and you begin to wonder, is it the same accident? Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the conclusion. The conclusion is, look how many perspectives there are.
Yeah.
That must enrich your account for what took
Mm-hmm.
place.
Mm-hmm. Which leads me into the other cue. At one time, you declare war, as it were, I quote, no more niceness at the cost of truth. I put it to you, what is truth? What is your truth? How do we interpret and accept a truth?
Now, Patamba, you must be a philosopher. That's that's a big question. I like you asking that question, because it's the kind of thing we need to ask of ourselves. First of all, I make it plural. I say truths. It's hard to have a single
Mm-hmm.
truth when you have so many witnesses who are testifying to a point of view. So you need to
Mm-hmm.
pluralize that.
Mm-hmm.
That's my first thing. And I think, and then I think truth itself is slightly mutable. It does evolve with time between generations and so on. So I do think in fiction we tend to encourage, at least for me, with from Guyana, grew up there. My parents are Guyanese, multiple racial infusions in me.
Yeah.
In Georgetown, in Mycone, in London, now in the States. So I see multiplicity as a part of my being. It's a part of my outlook. And so I do pluralize truths, not to make it a problem, but to say, look, it's a complicated answer, and let's keep it complicated because, if life is simple, you're not living. There's something wrong. It has to be complex just because it is. It is
Yeah.
complicated, and I think and also with Guyana too, it's a big place, a beautiful landscape. My upbringing in Erie Hall near Mycone, East Coast Demerara, you all know it. I had such a wonderful time there as a kid way back when that I would be loath to simplify it and make it a simple idea of being made. I want to keep it plural. I want the multiple races and influences.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, I mean, it also takes me back, Batambu, when I was last with you. We went to the Pegasus and we had some chutney soca, and it took me back to Erie Hall, and I was thinking, yes, we used to hear a lot of this in Erie Hall. Um, and so I know that sense of several things coming into a single stream to make something called a nation, however troublesome that is, that complexity has to be kept in the air,
Mm.
and we have to listen to each other. We have
Yes.
to have the patience to hear
Yes.
each other.
Mm-hmm. True. True. uh,
True, 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 true.
true. True.
Not just one. True, true.
Cancer is the primary focus here in your
Mhm,
new book.
mhm.
And I quote you again saying, I wish I had fewer things to worry about. I mean, you battling with cancer and you're thinking, wow, I wish I had fewer things to worry about. What were you worrying about?
My single worry about my cancer was so all-encompassing. I didn't think there was anything that could get my attention away from it. And
Mm-hmm.
when George Floyd was killed and the protests broke out, I realized there is a world out there, and it insists that I still remain engaged with it, and no matter what I'm preoccupied with. So I think I began to think that all those things, climate change, the kind of world my children and grandchildren will inherit, all of that was a part of the things I have to worry about. The plate might be full, but it has to be, because that's just the nature of being alive and consciousness. You're not in a single stream. Everything is interconnected. And actually, it helped me, Patamba, to think about it that way, to think about cancer not as a single plight against me, but the society was equally cancerous in
Mm-hmm.
its treatment of people and its use of authority.
Yeah.
The approach of the species of humanity to the planet was crazy. and
Yeah.
cancerous in the way we destroy it and ravage the earth. So I began to relate my problem to a problem of our contemporary moment, and it gave me strength. Ironically and oddly and counterintuitively, it gave me strength to actually face the disease because I realized cancer itself was operating on so many levels. My awareness of it would help me in my dance and fight and wrestle and whatever you want to call it, tango with it.
That- in this dance tango fight, you call on numerous friends in your time of needs. In fact,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
opening paragraph, you talk about poetry and
Hmm.
poets getting together. Page 45, 46, there is a
Hmm.
dissertation on poetry.
Yes.
This focus on poetry and writers runs throughout the book. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, no, that's so good that you mentioned this idea of a community that's wider than a living set of people, and that it extends to books, that books are living things, and that we can lean on them for sustenance, for help. And that includes, poetry and records, poetry online and so on. So I found myself emboldened and strengthened by that community of artists and their production. When it came to my struggle, the works offer solace, they offer analysis. The song and dance that I faced with my despair, I was helped by the music of those books and those texts.
Yeah.
So I did find it, the more I was able to read and attend to reading and listening, the better it was to help me in my fight. It wasn't a single battle. I wasn't alone anymore.
It wasn't a single battle, and you had multiple friends, included Anancy, Bear Rabbit.
It was me, taking off my proverbial hat to the oral tradition and the storytelling tradition I grew up in as a kid that was so vital to, to going to school and learning to read and write. And Nancy, the trickster figure, shapeshifter. And when we heard it in Airy Hall, and I heard stories about it, it was a way to keep us kids in line to say, look, you can play tricks, but in the end, you have to be honest because Anansi quite often will meet his comeuppance. But sometimes his trickery was so gymnastical in its thinking and its shape shifting that I admired his. Rather than learning from it as a warning tale of what not to do, I took it as an interesting survival technique. Just as we were able to hear Rajin, Juma, Juma, and realize that that came through indentureship and survived.
One of your main friends was music, especially the music of Billy Cobham. I listened to
Hmm.
some last night.
How did you find it?
You mentioned the ability of music to cure
Yeah.
your the cancerous state.